This is Faustin Bray with Sound Photosynthesis. Brian is recording, and we are in the marvelous citadel of Anne and Sasha Shulgin, known as Dr. Alexander Shulgin, I might add. And we have the incredibly good fortune to have an interview here on this gray, misty fall day. We're going to cover topics that I have been nurturing and savoring every time we have had casual meetings for the last 10 years, maybe. The reason why I located and ferreted you out was because of the work that you were doing with designing, well, it came to be said as designing drugs. Since then, you have, in my knowledge, created many analogs to all sorts of very interesting compounds, and that many people I know have used and gained incredible insights into their lives. Anne is now your partner in this great book, PIKHAL, which I and Brian have been looking at as a partnership book and also as a manual into the alchemic recesses of the future, I would say. So, in 1983, you made a speech at University of Santa Barbara that explained why it is that you had been doing that work of looking into these particular compounds. And the major feeling I got from that talk was that you were developing something of an empathetic type of a chemical to assist people to work with the edges of negativity and allow people to work together. And in terms of, well, the way I was feeling was that here we had this imbalance of the law coming down and kind of an oppression that was creeping over the hill. And then you were trying to figure out a way that people could actually develop some sort of an empathy and understanding with each other. And that was one of the reasons and the paths for your particular chemical motivation.
Well, you bring up about 5 things.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm getting you.
Well, one thing, a person doesn't go out and design a specific drug for a specific purpose. I mean, it requires skills that no one has.
It'd be great if it could, but it just
Right.
isn't possible.
And you design something that might have some action, that might enter into the human mental process, and observe what it does. And if it has some property that has, in your eyes, a virtue, it's a research tool, a way of elaborating upon something that can't be done that easily in other ways, then that may be a point in its design that you would incorporate in the design of something else. Or if you find something, a change has given a toxic effect that's not desirable, or it goes into areas that are not valid as research tools, then that change is something you may tend not to put into the next design. But each end result of these changes is a new molecule. It's unique and totally unpredictable.
So the goals are, although you have personal goals and freedom and the righteous moral way of living is sort of your overview, the specific chemistry that you've been pursuing is not exactly directed in inspiring that in others. It is to pursue the development of a new substance. Is that so?
Could you rephrase that question? No. There is a lot of work.
Fill in the missing blanks.
Yeah, there's a lot of work being done on research in the brain, and you'll find people will get into a seminar. They give a seminar and say that we have made radioactive chemical, be it an antidepressant or a hallucinogenic or what have you, and we put it into a rat, and after a period of time we decapitate the rat, slice up the brain, take the radioactive slices and put them on film and get pictures of the cortex and the brain. And very often people who have these seminars say, this is how these drugs work. And in reality, all you can say is, this is where these drugs go in a rat. And I'm trying to redirect the question, not to the brain, but to the mind, and use the only species that can express joy or doubt or paranoia or wish, what have you, the human animal. And I don't believe the study of chemicals that have influenced the mental process can ever be explored in an animal.
And every mind is a
Toxicity
garden.
can be.
But toxicity can be
Yeah.
gotten in with no difficulty. You can enough of a drug, you'll kill an animal.
Yeah. So you can test the physical toxicity or the potential for toxicity in animals, but you cannot tell any mental or emotional effects in
Not even quite to that generality. You can determine the toxicity of a chemical in an animal for that animal,
Yeah,
but you can't
right.
extrapolate to another animal.
Right. Okay.
If 9 species out of 10 are nailed at a given level, I would be hesitant to give the 10th species that same level. But all too often, take the hallucinogenic phenethylamines between rats and mice. There is often a 100-fold difference in toxicity. And which would you prefer to use to extrapolate to man?
I think in Santa Barbara, what Sasha was talking about was actually what is the not entirely hidden agenda, and it goes beyond empathy and bringing out the very best of people, which is the ideal. It goes beyond that, because what these materials basically do is give a clue as to what the ingredients of the entire human psyche are, 90% of which we don't know consciously. And what he was saying in Santa Barbara was, he was comparing the beginning of the nuclear age with the beginning of the psychedelic age, and feeling that one was potentially the one of the greatest or most effective answers to the other. That the nuclear age made it quite apparent that we are ready to destroy the entire species. We have the capability of doing it for the first time. The psychedelic age was the beginning of a possible answer, which is we have got to understand what the human being is, or we will indeed wipe ourselves out. And I think his point was a very good one, that no matter how it's done, and drugs are only one way, but whether it's done with meditation or hypnotherapy or whatever, it is essential that we start understanding that terra incognita, and to start being less afraid of finding out what's there. What drives us? What are the destructive impulses? What are the nurturing impulses? Do we have a chance? Is there a way in which we can begin to turn this around and maybe survive as a species? And I think that's what's at the bottom of this research.
Well, all too many people address the question of what's the working of the human brain, and that is where the vast majority of the research is being done. Neurotransmitters, synaptic connections, dopamine, serotonin. These are terms that are considered the grant awarding and publication rewarding
The
areas
only
of research.
respectable scientific.
And the working of the human brain has nothing to do with the understanding of what is going into the motivation of a person who is capable of pulling a nuclear trigger, and why he wishes to do that, and why we might exterminate the species. And that's the working of the human mind. And there is substantially no research being done on the mind, only on the brain. And these my main curiosity, my hope here is to develop tools that can probe that latter question.
Where is the mind?
Oh, Lordy, maybe in the spleen, maybe it's out in the attic, I don't know.
Well, they used to think the mind was in the liver, wasn't that so? I mean, the spirit and the mind.
And then they had hysteresis for hysterics and all that put it in the uterus, and then they decided that was sexist, and they had to change the meaning of it.
Well, now, as you have been in and out of the body so often, you know a lot of the maths. What do you really think? What is the mind, brain, spirit? I mean, give me a little. Let's just throw that out there. Mind, brain, spirit.
That may have to be the next point.
Intelligence. Well, you can do a shopping list, kind of. We're doing little.
Well, I think the mind, to most research pharmacologists, psychopharmacologists, is about the same scary thing as the unconscious is to most psychologists.
Yeah.
It's an area you just don't want to talk about and think about because you can't pin it to the wall and look at it and say this is what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
If you looked at the function of the brain, you'll find that there is no. There's a desperate search by brain chemists to find that one lesion, that one difference that makes a schizophrenic different than a normal.
Mm-hmm.
It has not been found.
Mm-hmm.
And the hope is if I can only find there's a lesion there, there's something wrong, then he and I are different in that point of view, and I am okay and he's not,
Mm-hmm.
because he has that lesion. This is true with homosexuality, it's true with
Any deviation.
any deviation. You take the person who climbs into a restaurant in Texas and shoots 26 women and then himself. You have that famous desperate wish to find something that you can point to that makes him different than you.
Mm-hmm. Some transcendence that someone else is looking for.
First of all, you hope he's on drugs. Then you can blame the drug. And invariably they're not on drugs.
Yeah.
So in post-mortem you look at the brain hoping to find a little curlicue here or a tumor there. And you don't find these. And you're left with that very grim conclusion that he is as you are, as I am. What made him do it and not allowed me to do it? Why is it I don't do it? And then you realize yet further that inside of me there is the capability of doing exactly that. I happen to stay that act. Why? Why did he not? And you'll not find it by looking at radioactive distribution in rat brains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you get the answer in using the tools I've been working with, but I think it's a
How
closer
many?
approach.
Do you think you're getting some answers to those big questions?
Unfortunately, my main art is creating the tools.
Mention the DOB study, which is still one of the most amazing.
There you were asking about drugs a while ago. This is an interesting example. And this, I put out the observations, and I don't understand them. DOB is a very potent hallucinogenic. It's active in 1 or 2 milligrams. And we did some radioactive studies in which we took advantage of the fact that DOB contains a bromine atom that is intrinsic to its action. Most chemicals, when you want to study them radioactively in the body, most of the useful radioactive elements are the big heavy ones. And most drugs don't have big heavy elements in them. But fortunately, DOB has a bromine that's big and heavy and is intrinsic to the action of the compound. Without bromine, it's not active. So we made it with radioactive bromine, using gamma-emitting bromine that we could see from outside the body. And we made the material, injected it into ourselves, and lay down on a moving bed that had a cascade of detectors underneath it. And the detectors are fixed and the bed moves over the top, and you end up getting a scan on a raster of you, seen not by light but by the radioactivity. So the first thing you see is a little bit of leakage at the site of injection, and then you'll notice all the time the bladder gets fuller and fuller because stuff's accumulated there. But we saw the distribution went first to the lungs, not to the brain. And the distribution built up in the lungs over the course of a couple of hours. And then finally the lungs began stabilizing and dropping off, and then the brain began showing its activity. And the material took 3 or 4 hours to get to a appreciably high concentration in the brain. And the drug takes that length of time to be active in the brain. So suddenly you have the question, are the lungs involved in the process of the action of the drug? Is the drug perhaps metabolized in the lungs to something that is the active species? We have no idea. The excretion, there's no ionic bromide, so it was not a decomposition of the molecule. No idea, but the lungs suddenly became an instrument involved in the action of a hallucinogenic drug.
Really, no one has ever thought
No.
about that. Of course, yogic breathing is always a way that people have used for centuries.
Yeah.
Going on with the lungs, people, I'm not a crack cocaine smoker, but I understand that the response is pretty fast. We have company.
That may be Jack.
Yeah, and cigarette smoking. When you get up in the middle of the night and you're a little bit off of your cigarette and you smoke a cigarette, how long does it take for the thing to hit your brain? It's right now, isn't it?
About a second.
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 But look how long it takes the It takes the blood to get you. You inhale it, it goes into the lung, it goes to the lung into the blood, it goes back to the heart and the pulmonary, then it goes down to the lower ventricle, then it gets pumped up here to the innominate, it eventually gets, it's a 10-second scenic tour. Why do you immediately get your kick out of the nicotine?
Okay, we have to stop.
Yeah.
Because the lung is clearly a sensory organ.
I felt and have always felt there is always the sensation of newness and interest and inspiration and kind of the creative edge every time I talk to either one of you. And you also mentioned that as the ingredient of youth, which I think is so, and the desire to know more. What do you, as you look past, or at your past, and as your life is making this mound of information in front of us, what do you think, as a collective or as individuals, all of these experimentations have done for your mental framework? I understand the idea of diffused intelligence as opposed to detailed intelligence or memory or all that kind of thing. But what do you think this, how has this impacted on your mental agility, your whatever, however you interpret what's going on as you have used these things for all these years?
Well, I personally believe that as you learn more from around you, you learn more about yourself. And I think that is probably the Rosetta Stone you're implying. It's a self-discovery, the self-awareness, the discovery of what is strong and what is weak in your own unconscious. This is one of the most powerful aspects of these tools, is they provide you with an access to the unconscious, which you normally do not have access to. And there lie the beasts that we're scared of. We do not know why we're scared of them. And many of our actions are in response to these fears of the unknown. And I believe in that accessibility, you begin giving the tools for diffusing that fear. Annie, you want to?
Well, I think that when you begin exploring your own psyche and the territory of your own mind and your subconscious or your unconscious or whatever it is, you are at the same time exploring the human psyche, because whatever comes up in imagery and in energy and in powerful emotions or tremendous beauty or a terrifying ugliness, all these, although in each particular person the imagery is going to be personal and different, the basics are, I believe, the same in everybody. And so the more you explore yourself, because that's all you can explore, you can only explore your own mind, the more you begin to understand what the human species is and what the potentials are. And again, we have, the entire culture is scared to death of the unconscious, because for the same reason that we're fascinated by axe murderers and mass murderers, and for the same reason that people go to horror movies to see heads rolling in the dust. What they're doing is they're connecting with what the ancient Indians called the Kali, which is bliss through destruction. And nobody says that to any of these people, but they are exploring their own destructive capabilities by seeing it on the screen. And unconsciously, both the makers of those movies and the watchers know that that's what they're doing. But it's a safe way of doing it.
Reconstructing the apocalyptic end or something.
Oh, and everything. But we also, what people who are afraid of the unconscious and who say, don't psychologize, don't try and get into this kind of thing, you just get messed up. What they don't understand is that the angels and the saints and the bodhisattvas are also in that same unconscious. And you cannot have it all good, because we are not made up of all good. We are also, we are the Kali and the Christ, all of us. And so the closer you get to understanding these archetypes and these forces, the more you begin to empathize with and have compassion for and understanding for the rest of the human race and why it does the things it does. And then maybe, eventually we'll begin trying to get a clue as to how it can be turned around, how the destructive power can be turned around. But also we'll have to understand how do we exercise the negative, the dark side, in a way which does not threaten to destroy the species, because it has to be exercised. I mean, when I get to play chess with somebody, I am using my aggressive, my male aggression in that chess game. I'm not being a goody-goody. You know, I want to destroy that opponent. I mean, a chess game is a very mild example of one way in which you can use this sort of thing. We have to try and mold our society in such a way that the anger, the resentments, the negatives can find expression in a way which does not threaten the entire colony or tribe or eventually the human race. And we've got a long, long way to go, and these tools are just beginning steps. And they're not the only tools.
Do you think, or how do you think about those images that our individual minds feed, our fantasies feed into the pool of the human, or is it only anthropomorphic? Is it bigger than the human psyche? Is it, what is this collective unconscious, and are you feeding it? Do you go in and out of the pool in these experiences? Do you source out of it? What's going on there? What are you doing in that? Where is your in, and where is the out, and where is our skin? Now just go for it.
I think we feed it. I think whatever it is, it's all of us. And I think this is one of the experiences we've had is feeling that what we are doing, whether it's making love or exchanging ideas or listening to music, is somehow feeding that larger consciousness and giving it a gift which happens to be a very beautiful and good feeling one. So I think that whatever that super consciousness is, everything that everybody does, for a good or evil, feeds into it and transforms it.
What do you think, husband?
Well, you have, as in all complex things, there is no, that is the way it is, or this is the way it is. We are at one level solipsistic in the sense that we are our own universe, and everything that out there is merely for our convenience, and this applies to every individual. At the other extreme of the interpretation, we are all a collective unity of a single big consciousness, and each of us is a minor aspect of that holographic totalness. Neither is satisfactory.
Right. Yeah.
They're both can contribute points of view for interpretation of your actions or your thoughts or your process, your contributions. It's exactly the idea, the concept of the transform concept itself, where you can see the entire world through a set of eyes that is a totality of a single living entity. The human animal is part of the planet, is part of the universe. You can see exactly the same things by seeing it as an individual, total individual interaction.
Microcosm, macrocosm.
The analogy which I like using is to try to show that you can have something that exists through time and therefore is continuous and therefore is sequential and by definition has a start and has an end and is a life and death process.
Of the organism or of the entire...
Of the entire universe. We being part of it.
Recapitulation, ontology.
On the other hand, you can view the entire thing as an instantaneous reality. As you could listen to a piece of music as a function of time. You can present a sheet of music that has every single bit of the same information. But it's eternal, it has no time. And yet you can view music either as a auditory continuous phenomenon or as a manual eternal phenomenon. It's the same music. It's exactly the same. Point by point, you have exactly the same information in it.
The particle and the wave. You have an individual moment and you have a flow.
And they are both have to be there simultaneously. They are both valid. They're not contradictory. They're different views of the same thing. And the individual interaction with the community and the greater collective unconscious is exactly this. You see it as a total individual unit and a collection of individual units constituting the human animal, or you can have it as the human species, as a all-encompassing unit. It's different views of the same thing, and I cannot say that one is a more rewarding interpretation than the other. One will give you certain insights and certain problems. The other interpretation will give you different insights and different problems. They all must be encompassed in a search for some comfortable explanation.
I know in a certain state one feels one is telepathic with the universe. Have you any, with the frequency and the overall view that you've had, do you feel more that you can key in to the waves or the flows?
I'm going to become hard-nosed on that too.
I want to hear about it.
Telepathy is exactly the same uncomfortable reality, non-reality. It is not a demonstratable thing, and yet there are examples that one is in awe to explain other than through a telepathic process. If you seek with the rules of science, the so-called rules of research and of hypothesis and challenge, telepathy is a total disaster. It cannot be demonstrated, and for the person who limits himself to those rules, telepathy does not exist. It's a fraud. And yet, if you'll step to another whole set of operating rules, which are equally valid, again, the transformed concept, seeing it through different eyes, telepathy is one of the saving graces of the human animal. Now, is it real or is it not? I'm sorry.
How about the shamanic uses of these things? We have ayahuasca, which is considered by the tribes to be a way, in the Amazon anyway, a way to transmit non-verbally information from one age group, from one tribe to another, from one locale to another, a way to do warfare. That would indicate some telepathy, but I mean, we have, you have been playing with the edges of all of these funny words that we're using, right? Buzzwords, I guess we could call them. Give us a little bit more about that. You know, what
Well,
the
as
shamanic
you're talking about
overflow,
the tribes who use telepathy as a means of communication, something that we find is not at all in our culture and not at all acceptable. I think they would find the Baptist church as a way of talking to God to be something that lay outside of their culture. And yet it's acceptable here. Is this telepathy? Is prayer and answers from above telepathy? If you accepted that, yes.
And yet we're all one human family. We're saying that we and the Kalahari people are of the same basic wiring, as all cats are, and all dog canine scenes are, and etc., etc. Are we saying mammals? Are humans including mammals? I mean, where do we draw the line?
Well, you brought up the question earlier, the difference between the brain and the mind. Would you be comfortable saying that a cat or a whale had a mind?
Well, this is what I'm asking. This is what I'm looking at. Right now, I think that they do have minds. But I can't tell where my own is enough to make a judgment about where theirs is.
Well, a lot of the behavior we attribute to intelligence or to training in an animal is there without our intervention at all. There are too many examples in nature where the genetic structure provides all of the behavior patterns that are seen. And if the behavior patterns are such that we say, that is what I would have done under those circumstances, and I would have ascribed that behavior to my intelligence, I therefore project that intelligence on that animal. And I think this is
Anthropomorphic again.
Yeah, and I think this is it makes me feel better.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily an explanation of what's real.
Right. I think probably our own equipment defines how it is that we can see the world, as maybe that's our barrier constantly until we get into the shape and size and whatnot of a whale. We will never know really whether the whale is doing whatever it's doing. But we do know that they have a lot of ways of communicating that we can tell are going on that we cannot fathom.
I'll give you another one that keeps coming up in just this last week. everybody from all over the world. It's little stories about how this year is going to be heavy rain or whatever because the squirrels or the marmots or somebody seem to be stuffing more eggplant into their acorns, whatever it is. And the leaves are heavier on certain trees and etc. All these signs, which always means a heavy winter, for instance. How do the trees and the animals know it's going to be a heavy winter when our own weather forecasters can only tell 24 hours ahead? With the satellite even, they can only tell maybe 3 days ahead.
In the wrong part of the time.
What kind of
There was a delightful
prescience
study
is
that was
there?
done down at Stanford Research Institute that's funded by somebody or other on determining objectively if there is bizarre behavior in animals prior to earthquakes.
Yeah, right.
And the answer was no. There's bizarre behavior amongst animals at all times at a certain level.
Yeah.
But you only remember it if the earthquake follows.
Yes, all right.
And they went out and searched out bizarre behavior as reported in the newspapers. I had a cat who all of a sudden did. And they went through some 200, 250 such reports and stretched them out on a chronological pattern and then tried to get earthquake in amongst them. And it was a complete disaster. But in no way does it keep people from being completely confident that they knew an earthquake was coming because the dog suddenly did something that dogs don't normally do.
Well,
Same thing
What
exactly.
interests me is that
Eggplants are always the time going into whatever acorns.
if people talk about these little natural signs, eventually have been shown to mean a heavy rain or heavy winter, or the glaciers are coming back or whatever it is. If you say, what does that imply about some form of consciousness that the natural world has that we don't understand? They'll say, oh well, nobody knows that, it's a mystery. Well, I like to go beyond that and try and speculate what kind of consciousness is that in nature that has some ability to sense
It
what's
won't
coming.
withstand the objective view of so-called scientific
But it's
method.
not scientific.
No, but I didn't say it was. I said it will
Yeah.
not withstand the objective view of the scientific
Any
method.
more than
There's
telepathy.
a trick with cards called magician's choice. It's a way I'm going to get you to pick that card.
Yeah,
Choose a card. If you pick that one, I win.
yeah.
If you pick that one, I remove it and say, you're right. And either way, you get to an end point. Same thing in nature. If you find that something occurs that is unusual, followed by another thing which you are anticipating, if it works, you found causality and you're a success.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, you say that happened in spite of, not
Yeah.
because of. So you have these beautiful paired apologies for explaining away to your satisfaction whatever bizarre thing you wish to explain.
Well, also magic, what was magic in the past, we have a little bit more of an understanding in the typical scientific way, and therefore that is demystified. And now we have a larger mystique to deal with, that we just don't know what the formula is at this point.
But
and therefore-
magic must be maintained as part of our
I don't think there's any way we'll lose it.
No, PIKHAL, there must be something to miracles because so many people believe in them.
Yes, right.
Okay.
Well, now, when you are exploring these outer realms, you have the tools, and you obviously are using the tools, and both of you are exploring this in a partnership way because there is an exchange, a fruitful exchange that has birthed this outrageous fat little baby here. And you are striving to do something which has not been done before and seemingly accomplishing it. What, in tandem, do you think that this has happened because you're in partnership, or because you have struck the best bargain with each other, or you've figured out the formula, the creative? I mean, what has happened here, and was it a product of working out these through the tools, working out the intricacies of human relationship, and is there possibility for this for other people?
Wow.
Yes. That's the way I ask questions. Take your pick.
In other words, if you and I hadn't met, would you have produced PIKHAL? Obviously not.
It would not have been the same PIKHAL.
But eventually he would have produced the chemistry. So that is his legacy. The chemistry in book 2 is half of his legacy, and this is his life's work. And the story part, he might have written his story. My part obviously wouldn't have been written. It probably would have been a much neater book and much better structured, but it wouldn't have been as much fun.
Now fun, let's talk about fun.
Yeah.
Fun. You too, from the outside, look like you're having fun.
Yeah.
People accuse us of going around having fun as though this is a bad thing.
Yes, of
This
course.
is not a serious endeavor, you know. But no, I personally think this is a noble process. So let's talk a little bit about fun in this big picture. What do you think the tools that you have developed are definitely going in the realm of fun, and they accomplish great and grand things? Is fun a great and grand thing? Is that as dreams are in the collective unconscious? Is the laugh and the giggle part of our heritage?
I should hope so.
What is it?
Well, fun is something that we have. I don't want to say that the goal of this research is to produce things that produce fun. On the other hand, it would be ridiculous to disavow the fact that there is some pleasure found as well as some pain in the use of these chemicals. But we are so invested in the negative aspect of the Calvinistic "thou shalt not have fun. If you smile, God will smite you." That there you find a lot of if there's a collective depression or collective paranoia, it's because a lot of people out there dare not see the pleasant side of things for fear of some retribution. They've been trained that this is not the way.
We don't deserve it somehow.
Now, who is it who recently wrote something about God is seen as a demanding overlord? Suggestions are fine, but demands are not really in the character of God.
It was the end paper on in the Sunday supplement or something. It was very interesting, very good. Yeah, if you want to be melodramatic about it, which is always fun,
But
when you explore these territories with psychedelics, eventually you'll come to an experience of total sorrow. It's one of the steps that seems necessary to go through, because that area exists. You know, the picture of Niobe, the goddess Niobe in the Greek, who cries continual tears. No tears make up the rivers and the oceans. I've hit that place, and you have to learn your way in and your way out. You hit many times the place where you have a feeling of absolute knowledge that this is death, and you may not survive. You may not get through it. And when you do get through, and when you do survive, you have a much deeper feeling of what that area of darkness and despair is. And that is when, just as when somebody's had an almost fatal heart attack, the thing they tell their friends is, suddenly I appreciate being alive. And this is the same thing. You understand suddenly that a true prayer to whatever kind of consciousness you want to think of as God or whatever, or your higher self, the only really good prayer is to give joy, to say thank you for life and for the fact that you are intact and you are living, for all its sadnesses and its miseries, that life is extremely precious, and that joy is something you owe yourself and the greater consciousness. It is one of the most tragic things about this culture especially, but there are other cultures also, is that we've been taught and programmed by certain religions and certain people that what goes up must come down. There is no free lunch. If you are really too happy for too long, there's going to be a crash. In other words, there is a vengeful God or set of gods out there who's going to punish you if you really enjoy yourself. And that is one of the hardest programs to outgrow. It is really hard because tragedies happen all the time. You lose a child to leukemia. You lose a home to a fire. There are a lot of philosophical changes and transformations that happen along the way. You have to begin seeing that these things do happen, that they are part of the ups and downs and the general process of living. But joy and pleasure and even moments of total euphoria are necessary. If you don't experience them, you are not truly allowing yourself to live. You are cutting short the full potential of your own psyche. That's my answer.
Well, now, do you think that the possibility of being able to go through so many states and so, people have called John Lilly courageous, or you called us, or whatever, sort of moving through these states and really facing your darker sides and whatnot, going through, knowing that it's going to be painful, knowing that maybe there'll be a payoff, maybe there won't be a payoff, maybe it'll be fun, maybe it won't be fun. Do you think that desire to accelerate that process makes one's individual life more than another who, say, is afraid to, they say, well, I never turn the lights off. In fact, I sleep with the lights on. Is there an advantage? Do you come across bigger fears, or, if you stopped at the first fear, would that be all the fears you'd have to face? Or, let's talk a little bit about that. Acceleration, chemistry.
Every person has his own balance of things with which he's happy, with which he has found a relationship that allows him to proceed. And not one pattern is better than another. Not the way I do it is the way another person should do it. I not only respect, but I hope to learn from the way that person does it differently than I. So the continual learning process is the most satisfactory to me. And that is not just learning from myself, but learning from others. You're mentioning the joy, the fun of an altered state. I had one opportunity to talk to a person who was adamantly against any changes of states of consciousness. And he said, if you don't like where you are, you should find out why you are deficient in liking where you are. And I asked him what it felt like to be awake for 24 hours a day. And when he realized I was referring to his dream states as an altered states of consciousness, he had to then view that he indeed had two sides to his own world from which he could learn. Maybe not directly as intellectual input, but that through that rather extraordinary indirect methods through the unconscious.
And it couldn't be controlled. You can't control it.
And to the dream state, the living state is not it's an amnesia. And to the living state, to most people, the dream state is an amnesia. So truly you have two faces.
Two entire lives.
Two entire lives that we happen to intellectually remember.
Now, do
Maybe
you
more.
think that, what is the impact of using these substances on the accessibility of this other life?
What I've told my son Brian, who intends to be a psychologist, is that if he's going through a very difficult thing and to break up with a girlfriend, or going now to Tokyo, he was expecting to have intense homesickness for at least a couple of days. One of the things you can do with an experience like that is, while you're suffering it, activate the observing part of yourself so that it learns. It notes what the reactions are, what kind of thoughts come up, and what kind of emotions come up, so that when he is later being a therapist to other people, he will understand much better what those people are going through. And he will have an empathy which can only come from having experienced some form of what that other person is suffering from, which will make him a much better healer. And it is only it's just like the old thing, we don't trust a doctor to treat us who has never been ill. We want somebody who has some sense of what that experience is. So whatever you go through, whether it's a difficult, scary thing, or a blissful, wonderful, oceanic, what they call the oceanic experience, which is sensing that network, that tapestry that we're all part of. This is learning. You're learning more and more all the time. And learning is its own justification. It's like truth.
Now, your children, let's ask this. You both have children, and how do you feel about these tools and children, or the maturation, or when it is appropriate or when it isn't, that kind of thing? Can we have some?
Well, I have very strong strong opinions against the use of tools to explore the structure of the consciousness, the unconscious, in children where there is not an integration and a completeness of that structure. I believe that.
How can you judge that?
I have seen in very young children. I saw one example where LSD had been inadvertently consumed. In fact, the parents had sugar cubes in the refrigerator, and the child saw sugar cubes and consumed part of the supply of the LSD. And the trauma came from it. The child was acting in a very childlike way, was responding to stimuli that the parents could not see, but then children very often respond to stimuli that parents could not see. I think from the point of view of the visual, I don't think the child had any different behavior than normal. So it may well be that there is an element of being in that altered, expanded place at all times as an infant. And our learning process may be one of putting restraints and closing down.
Closing it down, yeah.
Closing down the degree, the intellectualization of what's there. We know that's why one reason when the PCP was used as an anesthetic, the children responded to it far better than adults. Because in the recovery, they would have visual goings on, and they'd follow camels across the ceiling.
Yeah, right.
And to kids, no problem. Hey, far out, there's some camels going across the ceiling, and that was okay in their cosmology. But an adult would have a much more difficult process there because they know intellectually there are no camels on the ceiling, and so you have that both ends of the human development. One where I think it's a powerful tool for learning and for self-realization as an adult, and the other end where it is virtually without an effect because of the lack of the learning process that these things can't be, the behavior patterns, the cultural insistences upon in the transition through adolescence into becoming an adult. It's in the latter, it's in the in-between area that I think some very destructive things can occur, because it's in the process where the tapestry is not completed yet. And it can put inputs into that tapestry that are not socially acceptable and are potentially destructive to the person's interaction once he is an adult. This is I'm not proscribing, or proscribing.
That's your opinion.
Drugs. That's my opinion.
Now, in shamanic cultures, they use these things frequently as initiatory paths. In fact, it's part of getting from one level to another. And of course that fits into their culture, and that fits into their tapestry. In our culture, of course, it's looked on, who knows what it's going to look like in another 50 years or so.
I think that one of the things that's necessary, I believe, for a person to be able to use psychedelics at all successfully, that is for them to have got to the stage in their life where they're not using the usual terminology of psychology, but where their core sense of self, of identity, has been developed quite strongly.
The dissolving the boundary interpretation comes out in all sorts of images, which are frequently extremely common among a whole, it's more than just a group of people. It's whole periods of time, art forms,
yes,
whatever. And I'm interested in several of these, particularly the UFO experience, the angelic experience, the reincarnation after death kind of a sensation, speaking to little creatures, the beautiful castles in, fantasy land. There are a lot of common worlds that we inhabit, and we do that in dream state. But the dissolving boundaries, where, like in psychotic breaks, as we like to call them, visionary states, shamanic trances, these things are accessed with impunity in various states. And teenagers go out on a concert night, and they experience outrageous things that and then drive home. So I would like to delve into that, and I want you to just pour forth, and particularly the images. Let's go with the common images. Start there, because we have attached ourselves as dissolving boundaries thing.
Well, one thing I have experienced occasionally, I find it quite awesome, and yet it is having a vision or an illusion, like a dream, a fantasy, a picture in my mind that is something I may not even be able to identify, but have an overwhelming knowledge that it is authentic. And often by sitting and trying to mold it, look at it from different sides, on occasion I've been successful, on occasion I have failed in determining what it is. An example is one time I had the vision of a net, of a very much like a network on the side of a ship, a cargo net. And I was in the Navy, and I'm trying to remember, was I in a recovery, escape training, swimming training, some sort of ship training that had allowed me to become intimate with this network. And I kept looking at it, and then the authenticity was unquestioned. And it was on further looking at it, it occurred to me what it was a snood that my mother was wearing when I nursed. And it was, instead of being a big thing away from me, it was a small thing very close to me. And suddenly that was it. It was a complete recall of an event, or a continuing event, that lay in total loss of childhood amnesia. So they're often the thing that comes up. It is an opening that from which you can, first of all, the knowledge that it is valid, knowledge that came from within you, so it's not a superimposed thing, allows it to be explored, and it may lead to something that is quite pleasant, may lead to something quite exciting, may lead to something quite frightening. But all of these pleasantnesses and nice things and bad things are all jammed away, tucked away somewhere inside of you. You say, where is the mind? I have no idea. But it's in there somewhere. And we are not complete without having them out and usable. That is, I think, one of the powers of this type of exploration.
In other words, making things conscious is one of the most important aspects of this entire area of exploration, no matter what it's done by, is to make as much of the unconscious mind as conscious as possible, so that we can understand with the intellect as well as with the gut, what is going on, what has happened, who we are and what we are. But you cannot do that when things remain unconscious.
What do you think of the unconscious image of the UFO business? Or like Jung wrote the definitive UFO, the coming from the future and all of that kind of thing. I mean, that's an image that comes up. It's that shape, it's the idea of other beings superior, or maybe us in the future, maybe us in the past. It goes along with reincarnation and evolution. What's that image?
Oh, it's one of my favorites. Well, let me put it this way. I've talked to Ken Ring about the same thing, because he's interested in the whole thing. The idea of there being life on other planets, I mean, there must be. But it's really quite extraordinary to me that the alien, non-human life that many people have seen seems to come equipped with 2 eyes, one sort of nose, one mouth, with a head, little ear holes, and a neck and a body and 2 arm-like things and 2 legs. I mean, that's very human. how interesting that they should be built so much like us. And, you know, little alarm bells go off. How come they aren't geometric shapes full of radiating energy? I mean, how come they aren't, you know, round balls with fur on them? How come they seem to be so very recognizable as sort of human? My suspicion is that, and this is just one of many suspicions, is amenable to change at any time, but my suspicion is that the UFOs are a new form of the visiting archangels, or the vision of Fatima, or the Lady of Lourdes, whatever. I have a feeling that's the new modern construct of maybe the collective unconscious. And they seem to come in a form of people who have greater wisdom. Now, not all the UFO people seem to be nice. So there seems to be, unfortunately, a reflection of the dark side as well. But it seems to come at a time when we are beginning to be a global village. We're not isolated into little tribes. We are beginning to be connected all over the world by communications. And so we are beginning to have a consciousness of ourselves as a planet and a species on the planet. And we are beginning to be very conscious in an unconscious way of the fact that we are going headlong toward almost pretty sure destruction of ourselves, if not the planet. I think the planet can heal itself. But we really seem to be, you know, in poisoning the air and the water and the trees, a quickening of many new sorts of allergies, like environmental allergies. People can't go outside their homes. I mean, something is wrong. And it's worldwide wrong at this point, not just one little patch of a county somewhere. I think the UFOs are perhaps one form in which the collective unconscious is sending itself a message. You know, clean up your act. It's also a reminder that there are other levels of reality, and that there is a greater consciousness, and there is, it's not just us. I think the messages are many and varied.
How about your own? Have you received a message from your future self in any way?
Once. It's in the book. It's the only time it ever happened. It was very startling.
So there is an out there-ness that you would, that you agree with. I mean, you believe that that's...
But I think that is the extension of, you know, the over self, the greater self. But it was very brief and abrupt and a little bit impatient, and it said, stop what you're doing now and never mind that, because this is going to happen. It's exactly what happened, and it was a very startling experience. Never had that happen before. I think we all have the capacity for that. I think we all can be in tune with that side. But at the same time, the message is, be sure you come back to soup on the stove and getting the dishes done and living your life, which is a very important thing to do. And psychedelics are great. It's a wonderful journey to take, even if it's a difficult journey, because you've really got somewhere, you've learned something. But it's wonderful to come back. It's great to be able to come back to baseline and reappreciate ordinary life. Yeah. And when the spontaneous altered state happened to me, which is the crisis chapter, that was not, I thought it was a drug, and it was not a drug. The drug had nothing to do with it. It was just a way that the psyche had of saying, okay, now, blank sheet of paper, here's what I want you to learn. And it lasted a week, and I learned one thing after another, disconnected. But they were all things. I had my first lucid dream, and my second lucid dream, during this state. But it was essential to eventually come back to normalcy and to having the boundaries back up. Because that is the purpose of my life, is to live my life.
You can hold a pen.
And type on Yeah, right. So the UFO kind of thing, I suspect, is a human species construct from the higher levels of ourselves. I'm perfectly open to them being the critters that come from other planets. But I'm very suspicious of the fact that they look so human.
How about you, Sasha?
Well, I'm saddened by the fact that there is so much hokiness that has extended everything from flying saucers to bending keys to anticipating flashcards to distant viewing, that the little threads that might have been of value are almost buried under charlatanism that has exploited it and has given magic a bad name, so to speak.
I'm going to say that for sure.
That's good.
But there is truth in all of it, and all of it's fraud.
How would you explain, say, Mozart coming into the world, or talent? You know, people call somebody talented more than others.
Well, there's an extraordinary extreme view of this. I can't remember his name, an Indian mathematician who has on occasion been ascribed as being a directed form of insanity, who sat down, he lived for until I think he died in his 20s, but he could sit down and from who knows where create a large polynomial thing with 1 over this and 228 in the mathematics that turns out to be a way of correctly calculating pi 25 units at a time. And he'd create equation after equation after equation that looked absolutely chaotic, that turned out to be valid in calculating pi. And his explanation was, well, I got the information from out there. And the information was correct. And he was very little recognized in his lifetime and died in India in a very unknown way.
The documented
I've written a
fellow.
couple of books about it
Yeah.
since. Yeah.
But from whence came his
Yeah.
things? From whence came Mozart's areas?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I just wondered if you had a little hint.
No.
Electronic stimulation. Well, Crick, Watson and Crick, for instance, lots of people say they dream solutions, or they go to bed with a problem and wake up with a solution, or they have a vision or whatever. And you being an inventor, really, is the way I look at it, or a sort of an explorer that comes upon, discoverer or whatever. To me, that's a talent. Finding something after you've lost it somewhere out there is also a talent.
Well, it's not a matter of finding. It's you uncover every stone and look underneath it.
Right, but
And
there are
sometimes you
infinite
find
number of
nothing.
stones.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And there's no insight as which stone is the one that has the interesting bug under it. You just have to keep turning stones over. And so,
It's the multitude of stones that it's the energy that you go at the stones.
and it's not a matter of saying, hey, here's a neat compound, I bet this is going to do such and such. You make and find out what it does. And it turns out it's a total waste of time. And there are many stones under which lie no bugs.
Do you, electronic stimulation, have you used any of these brain machines or in combination with anything or any of the substances, or do you see any avenue of potential in this avenue?
I've not explored it. I don't know. I've never been a guinea pig in an electronic device. I have not even actually had the gloves or the helmets of virtual reality on, although it'd be interesting to see
It's
what's
in your
there.
future, yes. Well, how about the idea, the two of you and your group have done research a long time together. Have you seen any male, female kind of overviews that you can say you can block up, or is it specifically individualistic in terms of results? Or you, I'm asking, please, thank you. Then we can go to Anne. I'm a cagey guy, you are.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that we've set down early ground rules that have been very valuable. And within these constraints, I think
Which are listed in the book.
Which are listed in the book, yes. With these constraints, there has been an allowing of learning from one another. It's amazing. You meet a person, you think, a few minutes you're going to learn what you can from him and go on somewhere else. But you don't realize that person all the time is learning from other people too. And hence, there's always a new person in a person you know. And it reflects what that person has experienced and what he's learned in the time they've been apart. And so it's a continual weaving of a richer tapestry by interacting not just with a person and going on, but by letting the interaction itself develop into a value. It's like a love affair with 10 or 15 people. You can eliminate the aspects of it that would make it disastrous, such as sexual contact and dishonesty. And we put those two aside. What comes out of it can be very rich, and that's proven to be so.
Do you think that there is a male or yang, let's say yang, yin and yang kind of a thing, or yang, that has you focus and direct, and has maybe the females of the group do another kind of a mode? Are there modes of interpreting these things?
Well, one of the points of honesty is the fact that both are in each person. And it's discouraged in our society that the man should recognize the female in him, or the woman should recognize the masculine part of her. But in truth, I think in the yin yang you find a bit of the eye of the other in each, and it's the two are totally balanced, and the unity is both, and that is it's a very comforting thing to learn about yourself. That there are parts of you that you can, as a man, you can cry at a movie, and as a woman, you can lift a car off of a child. All these roles are usually ascribed to the various sexes, but both can play.
Would you say, or could you imagine any? I'll get to you on this one. Is there one? Are there things, ingredients, substances which can hold you? We know in negative ways. You'd mentioned what was that one? Starts with an H. Halcyon. Haldon. Different substances that can hold you in a different in certain worlds, and is there an advantage to being held in? For instance, you approach a certain wall and you're held at that wall until you deal with it. Are there advantages, disadvantages, chemicals that can hold you, or is your mind, like in Brazil, a state of mind, going to skip out no matter what you put in your body?
Well, I think a oblique way of approaching that is to discuss a circumstance I had once with a person. He sought me out, who had been, I think, intentionally given, but he was innocent of having been given LSD. And he was a totally naive person in the area of the psychedelic drug. And he sought me out. And it was a situation where he found me, and he was on the edge of panic because he was obviously projecting into areas that were, to him, alien and frightening. He was, as he described it, no matter where I walk, it all comes with me. That you can't step aside and let it pass. It was part of him. And I had here's an example of the two different approaches. From an emergency room point of view, the obvious answer is a good tranquilizer that can in-zombie a person, and it's, I think, basically easier on the physician than it is on the patient, but at least it does allow the storm to be ignored. And what I did with him, I said, well, you've got an interesting experience coming up here, and I'd love to join you. And so without using any drug, I merely said, give me about 10 minutes, and I managed to dilate pupils and go sparkly, and my hair went a little bit wild. And in about 10 minutes, I was kind of up where he was. And I said, hey, now thanks for hanging on. Let's go out and see what it's like. And we ended up walking around, and it turned out to be a spectacular experience.
Right, I read that.
And eventually it diffused, and it went its way, and as he dropped, I dropped. And I think it's a much more benign way, non-destructive way of taking a situation that can be, it's a totally out-of-control situation. It can go any way it's bent. And why not take advantage of the bendability of it and move it into areas that can be memorable and can be constructive.
Setting is the, yeah, would you do the male and female game that we just covered, and then we'll go to that one?
Oh gosh,
Or what have you experienced? I'll give you a little feeling that I have. You know, the latest business about dumping all over men, the Thelma Louise kind of a thing, and that whole trend toward now men are lousy because they're this and that and the other thing, they've ruined the world. Having had a son and lots of brothers and whatnot, I resist this.
Yeah.
I'm looking, my angle is here, I'm looking at the male-female thing. Are there home bases, not necessarily, culturally yes, but home bases in our wiring that the chemistry has come to that interpret things, blah?
Yeah, I think what Sasha said is absolutely true. You come across and can appreciate with the psychedelics the male femaleness of the fact that the soul has no sex. But also it's good to enjoy the fact that you are female and the other person is male. I think this is one of the reasons that we brought lovemaking into this. Unlike Castaneda and other people whose works I enjoy tremendously, we felt that a lot of people who write about these other realities and the spiritual world that we can tap into in many different ways. A lot of people want to make this entire spiritual realm only spiritual, and they're working with the programming they've had that the body and the body's reactions, the purely physical is a lower place. It is not as good or as high or as fine as the non-physical. And my own feeling is this is total nonsense. The mind and the psyche and the body should be together. This is one of the reasons that Sasha does not like compounds and will not go much farther with a compound that he has created, which divorces part of yourself from the rest of yourself, that gets you only out into outer space and the body is left behind. And I feel the same way about it. My warning bell goes off if I cannot truly and deeply feel emotions. If I am emotionally flat, that's one thing I will not take again, and it goes no further, because it means that something's being cut off. And in making love, you experience one of the greatest archetypes. And this is the coming together of the two opposites. With, as he said, you know, there is an island of the opposite within each. You can appreciate your male and femaleness, and at the same time the boundaries melt and you can be inside the other person. You can act out with if you're a male, you can act out and release your feminine side, and as a female you can do the opposite, as you wish. So it is as important an experience as anything in the psychedelic experience, in the psychedelic world. If you're lucky enough to have a good mate with whom you can have this melody. As far as male and femaleness in the society, the original duality, one of the original dualities is male and female. So one of the original, it's when you're thinking of Democrats and Republicans and Iraq and Iran, whatever, what you come down to is the great duality in the universe. And with male and female, you have people who will always treat each other in certain areas as enemies. But they need each other. They are not complete without each other. So eventually they have to live together. And they have to understand each other. And if we could regard the entire human experience as an extension of that nobody is actually a real enemy, a real other. He's a different part of the whole, and we have to learn to come closer to that other part.
Because we've had the great good fortune to be together during, me being born right after the bomb was dropped, or right before actually, and coming through this whole phase of the psychedelic and the, you know, this, all of this business, and now it's shutting down again and whatnot. And you, in fact, creating many of the things that have sort of escorted me along the path. So I am interested in lining up, you might say, some sort of a graph or some way of talking about the evolution of our culture. This is our culture and our time. And the psychedelics, even though the people, most people, even if they're not denying that it had an impact, it is undeniable for those people who know and who see the flurries of it coming up in the art and whatnot. Even our science is, even though it's the paradigms and the overflow from one thing to another, the dissolving of boundaries again, has been influenced because we knew that could be so with LSD and all of these different things. MDMA was a wonderful, or MMDA, is a wonderful way for relationships to sustain themselves, to work out these difficulties that you, maybe divorce has increased in great leaps and bounds, and yet at the same time we now have a tool that maybe be able to handle so that the nuclear family can adapt, or maybe that we can deal with the expanded family. The convivial society, being these small groups that you have all talked about, being an ideal way of transmitting information and also just keeping society together and being friends. These tools for increased empathy, I keep going back to that. The cultural evolution, I'd like to get an overview. We've contracted, we've expanded, we've contracted. It seems to me on a superficial level that we're contracting again, and yet we have the DEA having a meeting that is talking about LSD. Now this may be another way for them to be shutting down, but at the same time some intelligence has to be increased there. Give me an overview of our evolution as you see it, culturally, artistically, I mean, chemically. I want to see some future, how it impacts on people as they're getting older. We looked at Rossmore and all those people. I mean, there are new drugs for helping people not lose their memories. There's all sorts of chemicals that people are using for allowing their immune systems to be increased, and you know, let's talk a little bit about the overview and the cultural evolution. Can you go on?
Well, okay, I would view it, I think, differently than you. I look at my overview is a very negative one, and I believe that there is with the increased population, the increased poverty, the increased losses, the losses we have, that there will be a continuous move. People say the pendulum swings and will swing back. But sometimes I think in this case the pendulum is swinging, and like a ratchet, it can only go further in that direction. I believe that we are losing at a very rapid rate our ability to have this form of honesty with ourselves, because it's not deemed to be publicly valuable. For a community to survive as a unit, as we see it, a large community, it is necessary to take away those aberrant aspects of it, the irritant aspects of it, that are not to the common good.
The individual. The individual
is less tolerable, can be less well tolerated as our community gets larger and bigger. And we have the changes, for example, in the powers given to law enforcement. As the drive is, we will have a more law-abiding community if the law enforcement is given more tools and its job is made easier. I feel that the law enforcement's job should be as difficult as possible, and I'm a very strong believer in losing that aspect. I think that and notice the latest issue of Life, they talked about the Constitution, and they had 2 pages on presumption of innocence. But that's not in the Constitution. That was put in there because it's English law, English common law. But we have no presumption of innocence. We have had. But the very concept of a random urine test is the most exquisite presumption of guilt. And it is now not only that it is being generally accepted, the use of this form of philosophy is expanding very rapidly. Every single time there is any sort of a public event that somehow would support it, that event is broadcast widely and the support comes from it. Every time it fails, the failure is buried because it is not in keeping with what is being promoted as a self-image of our community. I find it a very frightening process, and I'm afraid I don't share your optimism that we are evolving into a higher consciousness. I think we're evolving into a police state, and I'm willing to say it quite blatantly.
Well, I can't actually say that you've picked up on what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is whatever will trigger it, you're thinking. So what I would like to say is that I stand aside from what you might consider my opinions. But let that be on the record. At the same time, my desire in this particular frame is to bring awareness and archive what the path is, so that at least we'll know where we've been, so that we'll know somehow how we got there in the archaeological digs sometime in the near future. Or something. And my feeling is that you and Anne and a handful of people have researched these elements in a much more profound way and honest way than almost any other field, because you're dealing with the mind, and that is really our only thing that
well,
we
the
have.
time will come when the research will be recognized as needed. The understanding will be recognized as needed, and I think that's one of the overriding reasons for putting the material into this book, is when that time comes, then these tools will be available.
Exactly.
They're available now, but they are not ethically, or in our legal structure, legally usable. But this, if there is indeed room for optimism that these things will change, then the time will come that these tools will be of value, and they exist, and they should be documented. I think Anne used the term a legacy, but rather than that, it's a repository.
A repository, exactly.
Of information.
Right. I think the idea of having things in book form, if there are a number of them out there, even if they're burned, there at least somebody's going to have one buried somewhere along the line. That's the way I look at all of this compulsive documentary behavior that we exhibit before you. And the people, I mean, you can't write it all down. It is in the way you express yourself. There are nuances. Those computers may get demagnetized. Who knows what a solar flare will do. There will be, we have to get in all the media that we have available to us, and in the male-female version, trying to make these things meet. Is there an emphasis that you would like to pull together right now, and then we will, we'll do some more on that in the future? We've got a big thing here. Are there bits and pieces that you would like us to grab a hold of, particularly out of this?
I want to go back to overview.
Good.
I have a different emphasis than Sasha. I think this country may indeed, as part of the general balance of things, as the Soviet Union with that totalitarian control of everybody breaks up, I think we are swinging into to take the place of that, and we may indeed go to police state. But we're just one country. We're not going to remain the biggest power. Probably not very long. We are sliding very gradually to a third world status at this point anyway. But what I see is something we were talking about with somebody else yesterday. The entire ecology movement, the entire awareness of the interconnectedness of everything on Earth, I think is a direct result of the psychedelic years. Nobody says it, but the awareness is one of the first things that happens with a psychedelic, as it does with other altered states which have been brought about by other means. One of the first things you experience is the interconnectedness, not just with other human beings, but with other forms of life. And you experience an awe and a reverence for the miraculous existence of, birds and snakes and everything else that exists. And trees. Trees are extraordinary things. And I think that without having assigned it to the use, the very broad use in the 60s and 70s of psychedelics, I think that the entire ecology movement was due to Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. She was the first person to really make it a conscious thing. And I think it is also due to many, many, thousands and thousands of people having psychedelic experience and having this awareness come upon them. And all you have to do is turn to the Discovery Channel and watch some of those, the kind of things that everyone makes fun of. Little documentaries about the mating of the so-and-so birds. And if you really listen to the people, the voiceovers in those documentaries, time and time again you realize that that person who's making the documentary has had this experience because of the way they say what they say. And I think in ways that we are not aware of, the gray, brown, navy blue, and black suit in the business world has given way to less of a fear of color. This is a direct result of the psychedelic explosion. As with all revolutions, there are extremes at the beginning, and the psychedelic revolution was full of kids in trying to say we don't really have to make a living, and life is beautiful, and waving flowers. But the basic increase in awareness, I think, has molded the entire society, not just in the United States, but all over the world, possible exception of China, I'm not sure. And the clues are picked up everywhere. And so I think even if the United States goes the way it is going toward a police state, which is quite possible, I think that the human community has had its consciousness raised. Not all of it, but enough of it, so I think it's going to make a great deal of difference.
Even though we tend, when the moral majority gets the opportunity to vote, they always go towards more fascism?
Well, when you have a revolution, which is mostly unconscious, in awareness, in greater empathy, in greater connection, you always have an increase of the urge to keep things the same, to keep them stable, to go back to the Midwestern town, to the ideal American life where there were no questions about this, that, go to church on Sunday, etc., which never really existed.
Right.
But you have this nostalgia and this desire to keep things safe and within the known and traditional parameters. And the fact that it is so strong in this country politically is an indication that the revolution is happening. But the revolution is very scary because it means eventually a dissolving of national boundaries. It means becoming aware of ourselves as part of a world community, not just Americans, but human beings. And this creates a tremendous turmoil in those who find their only identification, their only identity, and their only feeling of power in aligning themselves with a flag.
A team.
Yeah, become part of this team with this name, this language, this tradition. And never mind those others, the outsiders.
Gets too big.
So I think that the police state mentality, the control, above all, control people, is a reaction to the fact that things are beginning to break up and expand. So my view is extremely optimistic, not for this country, but for the species.
Well, now, the basic fear people have is of death, Jason, generally speaking. Do you think that there is some way that there used to be, different ceremonies and whatnot. People, even wakes are ways for people to handle death. Do you think that there's a chemical or a substance or something, for instance, with terminal people or whatever, that can help them to face? This is just another dissolving of a boundary. Why we want a police state is we think we're going to keep the hordes from killing us, basically, or taking our dinner away or something like that. Is there some way that on the really essential level we can approach our fear with a pill?
Well, I see no reason if you can become at peace with altered states and find them instructive and valuable. Death is strictly another altered state. It's another transitional. And there's no reason to be feared. It's inevitable.
Is there some way we can, I don't want to say institutionalize, I don't want to say proselytize, but I want to say something like bring that to, we don't want James Jones or anything like that, but do you know what I'm saying? Is there some way we can bring that into comfort? Like a Valium, but not that way, you know what I'm saying?
How about Huxley's death?
Huxley died with an intentional use of LSD as a transition. I would not ascribe to that myself, subscribe to that, in that you are losing the essence of another learning process. And the death process is a very definite change of state of consciousness. And why muck it up with amnesia and with a superimposed abnormality? I think one of the reasons that people fear death is the fact they have not resolved life. And suddenly they realize that their chances are no longer there. So perhaps one of the best preparations is to resolve some of the conflicts.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Well, you do it by acknowledging. You do it by acknowledging that there is a reason for a conflict. And acknowledgement, as they say, is halfway there. A lot of people have the conflicts which are not acknowledged, and they are either, if they are outgoing, they are angry. If they're ingoing, they are depressed. But this is directed to something that is not acknowledged.
The illusion mysteries, weren't they set up for, one was to go to the oracle once in one's life, to get an answer to one's question, and one had a choice to do that. Do you think that if we in society had a chance, if we only promised to do it once, that maybe sanctioned go to the mysteries once or something? You know what I'm saying?
There's actually pointless to search out an answer if you cannot formulate the question.
Right.
So that, again, is the halfway there.
Right.
The acknowledgement or asking the question.
Right.
And to go to the top of the mountain saying, oh, please give me an answer. If the wise person sits up there, what the hell is the question? And I never thought of it. It's a nice trip, good view, but it's the hardly rewarding experience.
Well, when someone does fear, and they actually finally come to the fact that the reason why they're so aggressive is because they're afraid of death, or they're afraid that somebody's going to take whatever away from them. Maybe, is there a certain, I'm trying to figure out a way that we can disarm people.
Well, one thing I found, I've used it on occasion with talking to people, is to look at the fear and try to see it, have the person see it as something that is not predictable. It's not known. The unknown lies around the corner. The fear is from not being able to anticipate with any comforting accuracy. And what I often say, well, how is that different than excitement of the unknown? Excitement of not knowing what's around the corner. Excitement of being able to predict. And suddenly it's the same phenomenon. But instead of living in fear, live in excitement, and you still have the unknown ahead of you. But it's a little more easily appreciated.
Right. The unknown being taking some of the edge off of that by putting interesting or adventure on top
Just
of it.
use the word excitement, adventure, interest, instead of fear, scared, and I don't want to go around the corner.
Now, there is the concept of hologram in the cosmos at the moment, and that everything, either the brain model, Pre-Brum's brain model is holographic, the universe is holographic, every single thing has all the ingredients of every other thing, and even in your interpretation of what these substances do, you say that even though the same ingredient goes into all different, all these different minds, the mind is what's responding to it. Is there a smallest, we call the photon a smallest entity, is there a mind, one unit of mindness that would be a something or other?
A word has been coined for that called a meme, and in which it is a conceptual unit that represents the basis of an idea. I saw on autopsy, I saw the report of the autopsy of this hydrocephalic in England, who had gone to college. He had a mediocre college record, and he ended up as an instructor in a small university, and no great genius and no great intelligence, but a very competent person, very competent instructor. But his head was just slightly larger, and he withstood a lot of teasing because of it. But they had never really x-rayed or looked at it because he was just considered to be a functional individual. And he was killed in an auto accident of some kind. And in the autopsy, they opened his cranium, and all he had was a thin film of brain on the inside of the skull. All the rest was ventricle. So the actual brain mass of this person was minuscule.
Amazing.
It was totally amazing. I have the record of it in there. And so you say, well, the brain capacity, what have you, and you start weighing this, has really very little necessarily to do with your capability, your mind.
Right, mind.
Function.
Uh-huh.
So where's the mind of this individual?
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe it was in the ventricle. I don't know.
Well, maybe you carry it around kind of a little invisible kite behind you. You keep it up there somewhere, away.
The hologram, where all is contained in any, but the smaller the any, the less well defined is the all. It's probably the best way of looking at a hologram. The all of the brain's memory is contained presumably in any of the brain, but the smaller the amount of brain, the less well defined is that memory. There are unusual exceptions in that they have found specific areas in the cortex relate to parts of the body, both sensory and motor, where you have a discrete assignment between area and function. But to a larger measure, the interpretive aspect is diffused. You have the optical, the occiput, and from there radiates a increasingly diffuse area that interprets what is seen. And one tends to sometimes miss the distinction between the actual vision and the person's response to what is seen in his emotional or in his interpretive or his behavioral.
Which is where we get to fantasy and imagery.
Fantasy and imagery, the distinction I have made there, and there may be Webster-type definitions that are different, but to me, imagery is, as we were mentioning earlier, the arabesque, the design, the things that are structured, things that are seen against a backdrop. I remember one time in one experience, I had a moving marquee of letters spelling out words, and it was moving across in front of my closed eyes, and I was quite fascinated by what was being said. It didn't make a great deal of sense, but nonetheless I was observing it with a lot of curiosity.
You couldn't read it.
I did read it, but it wasn't that sensible, but I knew that it would straighten out if I paid attention to it. Then I got totally caught up in that to me is a good example of imagery. And I got caught up into where it was coming from. Was it coming from out there somewhere and just feeding through and disappearing in a wastebasket over the right? Or is it just being spelled up like some sort of a recapitulation from inside of me and being dropped down in there? Who's the author? And I got so involved with the assignment of authorship that I really forgot to read the text. And I'm sorry, it might have been something of interest, but I at this point, I don't know what was being said. The extreme of imagery. Fantasy is quite, to me, at least in my usage of it, it's quite a different term. It's where, again, with eyes closed, aborted immediately on eyes opening, the eyes closed, you begin taking dimensions and moving. For example, you're lying next to a person, in your imagery, you'd be in your own visual theater. But in fantasy, you can actually invade that person's territory, because you see yourself as changing in your mind's eye and involving yourself with a geometry that is all-encompassing. And it can actually be quite apologetic. I'm sorry, was I moving in on your space because my space was involving where you happen to be? And this is fantasy is a much more of the dream character, where you, rather than seeing things in imagery, you are living things in quite a different
realm. That encompasses the virtual reality kind of a thing.
That would be of that in that latter realm.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the way I use the two terms, and there's not black and white there. There are things that sort of play both roles. If you are listening to music and you see the music as an orchestra suspended above the floor by the very act of their playing, you are now getting into that fantasy world where it is a different structure. But then without the music, you would not have the orchestra. So there is still sensory input from outside that lays the framework for what happens. So it's not a totally devoid of origin hallucination. It builds upon what is there.
And different sites in the body are responsible for activating different kinds of responses, and you have come upon substances that activate different parts of the body and different responses.
I don't know where these things activate. You put the same compound into a rat. I'm not at all convinced the rat has either fantasy nor imagery. At least my communication's not good enough.
But in your human tests, there has been some consistency.
There has been, and yet there has been exception. There is no predictable outcome from any given experience. Each one is unique to the person. You say, oh, I recognize that material, I had used that before. The experience could be totally different, because you are never the same person on each experience.
I believe that everybody has the same source of wisdom, knowledge within them. And one of the worst things is to, from my point of view, and this is definitely a minority point of view, is to go according to a particular spiritual path, a particular somebody else's idea of what the path is. I think you should read everything and find out everything that everybody else has experienced, but not to follow the way Castaneda has gone, or the way any other guru or explorer has gone. Find out, but form your own path. And don't fall into anybody else's program, because it's his program. Even some of the greatest spiritual teachers in the world, they have tapped into whatever the source is, but it has still come down through their personality and it's their programming. And your search should be your search. And for people to keep their own power, and keep their own power to discriminate and to question everything, not to adopt anybody else's worldview, ever.
Which is in fact what's being attacked right now, is the individual point of view, the ability to actually make your own decisions.
Yeah.
The whole concept of the New World Order is to homogenize us.
And remove choice.
Remove choice and cut down the thing that sticks ahead of sticks up over the crowd. You were talking about that earlier, the political aspects of these things. You want to continue with that?
No, we were getting. That's almost too big. Politics is just power games, and power games go everywhere. Whether it's the shaman assuming a great deal of authority and power over the tribe, or whether it's a president of the United States. Everybody's concerned with achieving power, good and bad kinds of power, and keeping it. And the kind of the power that people like us want to achieve is the power of knowing, as much as possible. But I was also thinking about inflation and humbleness, and that it goes into one of the most exciting and fascinating experiences that most people who do this kind of research get to, is the experience of inflation, and which is thought of as tremendously dangerous, because a person caught in inflation is, you know, megalomaniac, and they can't get out.
Bush.
No, a really psychotic state. That's the extreme.
Yeah.
There are various degrees along which presidents sort of lie. But the experience of inflation is a feeling of being complete, all by yourself, totally sufficient unto yourself. A feeling of tremendous radiating energy. The feeling that you don't need anybody else or anything else, that you have access to, you know, all the questions and all the answers and all the power and everything. And it's fantastic. It's great. Then you have to learn your way out. And learning your way out, you have to find out why this isn't a good way to live the rest of your life. And then one of the things that begins to come to you is that whatever you have within yourself, this archetypal high priestess or whatever, also exists in everybody else. It doesn't matter whether the person is Down syndrome, autistic, or, you know, IQ 185. Everybody has the same, unconsciously has the same source of wisdom. So the advantages you may have in intellect and in experience are not sufficient for you to even think of leading somebody else, because they have basically the same equipment. Yeah, and they can form their. I mean, some of the wisest things, some of the greatest wisdom really does come from people stuck away in God knows where,
Right.
with a job as a waitress or carpenter, because wisdom has nothing to do with intelligence. It's something that comes from somewhere else. So one of the things about the psychedelic journey is, as it is with any other altered state journey, is finding out that you have this immense, you know, powerful everything, and also to understand that everybody else has it too. So that's
The unifying feeling, which is again diametrically opposed to the way that the New World Order wants us to feel. They want us to feel that there's a hierarchy and some people can take care of the other people better and all that kind of thing. And so you're speaking in terms of it being an individual and surviving by your wits, essentially.
Yeah, but also the capacity to learn in both the outside and the inside world. If people are given the freedom to learn at their own pace, their own rate, and to not learn if they don't want to, but freedom to do it your own way with as much guidance as you want, but not to follow a particular religious belief or spiritual path or and people are so eager to give their power away to somebody else, and there's so many people who are eager to take that power.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest spiritual traps there is.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's anything that can be learned from psychedelics, is to avoid that. I learned a lot of that from Sasha.
How much is fantasy? How much is imagery? Can we impact anything on the outside? What is this? What is the chemical feeling, or how is this creation of eternity? Where is that found, and etc.?
Well,
Everywhere.
it's a totally subjective thing. If you have the illusion that time is slowing, and you slow your internal clock to observe it, your internal clock and time are once again in synchrony. And so there's
So you're
no...
in time.
You're in time.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, slowing or speeding of time is not an objective thing to be seen, because you are the observer, and it's you who changed your clock to accommodate. So I don't know if you take
If
that...
there's any way to...
I don't think there's any way of really getting at it comfortably. Everyone's had the illusion, you know, good heavens, that it's 8 o'clock already? That fleeting of time. Or the same event, if it were not one that caught your fancy, you'd be, my God, is this going to go on much longer? Everything's going quite a different pace. But you accommodate yourself to the time you see, and if you take that to the logical extension, you can stop the clock and stop your observation of it and be quite content with it.
But what about the experience we had with stopping the second hand on this clock here?
It could very well be a folly on do. We fed each other very nicely.
But how did that happen that we saw exactly the same thing at the same
It
time?
could very well be a folly on do. We believed we did, and we accepted one another's observations. Don't you have situations like that? That it could be a total imaginary thing that we happen to agree upon. The consensual.
Yeah, but nobody's explained what a folly idea is, except in the family interaction sense, where you get caught in somebody else's vision of things.
Which is exactly what we may have done.
Yeah, but this was real eye vision, and we were
Subjectively very, very real.
Well, then what's an empirical, what is an empirical scientific experiment? How many people do you need to have in on
You're
something?
bringing in the science thing again, and therein lies the seeds of the disaster.
Yeah, back to it.
Okay.
Your friend who loves the idea of people anticipating what card they're going to open next, or just you turn the cards and tell you if it's a wiggly line or a star. And I have always asked if the procedures he used could not be written up so they could be challenged in a scientific method. And his contention has always very nicely been, when you do that, you destroy the phenomenon. And he said the better than odds guesswork, the foreseer, the one who flips a coin and gets 9 out of 10 heads, it doesn't work when a person who does not believe is present. So I asked him, well, how do you know if it's a person who does not believe? Or is it when it doesn't work, you know a person is present who does not believe? I mean, it becomes a self-referential thing.
Exactly.
And there are things that can only be answered with the scientific method, and there are things that cannot be answered with the scientific method. And to try to jam all the soldiers in a single-sized boot does not work.
We like that. Well, now, there are all sorts of great claims that are made of psychedelics. One is, of course, that it enhances your visual capacity or your acuity. Another one is that it just enhances your ability to have any kind of a vision. Other, your appreciation of beauty. I mean, what is beauty? What do you think, from the broad spectrum of mental activity that you've had in rich inner life, what is your perspective on what beauty is?
I guess it's what I appreciate.
So, but there are lots of times that one appreciates a kind of a something for not its beautiness.
Well, going back to what you just said, if you enhance the seeing of color, enhance the seeing of detail, the color is what it's always been. You have not changed the color. You are merely making yourself aware of a greater variety of inputs that could be there. But the person who's totally aware of all these varieties of inputs is what we define as a schizophrenic, where there is no limitation and no judgment that can be called upon what one sees, and no prioritizing that can go to putting things in an order that allows you to achieve something or allows you to minimize danger.
The filters.
So the filters. And so yes, this is one I would consider one of the hazards and one of the dangers of psychedelic experience, in that you do and can lose the capability of assigning risk-benefit to various inputs, and you may very well respond to a fascinating input that has no value whatsoever in protecting you walking across the street. So there are. This is a negative side. The idea of a filter is a very desirable one for preservation, self-preservation.
So a safe environment is one way to, when you're dissolving your boundaries, to make sure that somehow your overall structure is in good shape, like your body.
Otherwise, you're going to be attentive to the surrounding environment and find yourself possibly with a very, very uncomfortable experience.
So a safe setting is essential. Otherwise, if you're really in a very altered space, although again, I think that a certain amount of this is a matter of learning. I don't think you and I would easily lose that judgment now. Well, whereas
You do not take that on.
you don't take
you
the
pay
risk,
attention.
right? But it takes years and years of practice. Yeah, it does. This is, I mean, we are just absolute beginners in exploring those states. Really beginners. Every now and then I realize how much there is I haven't even started to learn. But the matter of judgment is to me a little bit like the matter of the inner core. You have to learn how to have that place to come back to and to be able to identify it as the place.
In the crestule of discrimination, you can only do a certain amount in your life. What is the direction that you would like to
I don't have a goal.
develop?
I just want to keep turning over rocks.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And find what's there, and if something of value, that's nice, and if not, I'll learn from it.
Uh-huh.
But no, I don't have any particular, I have nothing,
Yeah.
so
No,
it's just to pretend I have one.
And publish the results for
And publish the
people
results,
who-
one way or the other. If I publish in scientific literature, that's fine. And if I publish in the form of PIKHAL, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the information is common knowledge now. And that has
This
to
is a
be-
popular form. I mean, now we have gotten
Mhm.
a popular form. This is really the first time.
Well, it loses total scientific value because it's not a refereed pattern. On the other hand, it's research that does not really follow a scientific method to begin with. So it's to each person to take from it what he might find of interest and ignore or argue with what he finds takes issue with. But it's raw material to work with, and it'll be different things to different people.
And you have come from a therapeutic background. Is that not so?
I can't really say that. I discovered I was a good therapist, but I have no credentials. I worked as a therapist for a couple of years and learned a tremendous lot. It's very exciting.
See, but there's a tendency toward healing in your, or is the word healing, or is it searching by virtue of someone else's seeking through their?
Well, when
Healing is the other person's job.
Yeah.
Healing is the other person's job. So you don't
Yeah.
heal a person.
you help somebody find their own inner healer, and it's a very exciting thing to do. I'm very glad my son is going to become a psychologist. But it was a taste of something that I could have done for the rest of my life very happily, and I found I had a gift for it. But I had to basically choose between putting out tremendous energy in that direction and doing this, working with Sasha, and this is marvelous. This is great fun. I want to continue doing it.
Great fun. I like that. There's it. Well, what I like, and the giggle now, we hear the giggle out there in the spaces, don't we? We have to admit that we hear that giggle.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
what is that little giggle? Who's out there giggling at us? Who is that?
Well, it's fun to be alive and to be doing something that you enjoy. It's great.
But it's out there too. I mean,
Oh,
you
sure.
can hear
Yeah.
it out there.
Yeah.
What is that? Is that us from the out there-ness taking joy and glee with what we're doing here? What is that giggle?
It's a smiling Buddha. The essence of look how marvelous this all is.
So, was there? I had said, is there anything that we would like to kind of enhance in some way, or just?
I think two things
Yeah.
kind of wrap up a
Yeah.
lot of my own philosophy that I expressed somewhere in the book.
Yeah.
And one of them is never take yourself too seriously, which is a point that I think I bring out a couple of times. But the other I think is extremely important, and just as important, that is never lose your sense of humor. And if you can address a lot of the problems that come up with one of those two things as a reinforcement of where you stand.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Basically, you look upon it in the same way when someone brings a conflict to you. You can say, "Why not?" which diffuses half of the artillery, or you can say, "So," which very takes care of the other.
At which point, somebody's going to take a fist and go, all right.
Why not? So.
I like that. I like that.
Thank you.